Well guys, it's that time of year again. Yes, it's still pretty early, but now that we're close to a month into the season, I thought we'd go over the goalies that have been struggling the most. As we go through the list, you'll quickly notice that all of these attendees mentioned are starters and have played at least 9 games so far, which means that, even though again it's early, we have a relatively adequate sample size of what to expect. And with that, here are 7 NHL goalies that have struggled so far. The farther we go along, the more we'll begin to see a trend. For the most part, the teams that are struggling also have struggling goalies as well. And unfortunately, Jacob Markstrom is no exception. Brought in from Vancouver during the offseason of 2020, Markstrom, for the most part, was pretty consistent for his first 2 seasons in Alberta. However, throughout his first 10 contests he's played in this campaign, the netminder hasn't been playing his best hockey. As it stands currently, Markstrom is sporting a .893 save percentage and a 2.97 goals against average. While these aren't the worst stats in the league, most of us know, watching, that Markstrom has more to give. With his team struggling, however, it's been harder for the goaltender to secure wins. If you look at his play game by game, in all games except 3, he's given up a trio or more of goals. Hopefully for Flames fans, as the team begins to heat up, so will their netminder's game. Yes, pun intended. For the Ottawa Senators, you could easily say that things haven't exactly went as planned. For starters, their starter, Cam Talbot, who was recently acquired from Minnesota, has been injured for most of the season. Therefore, in order to remedy the situation, Anton Forsberg has been forced to man the crease for the majority of games thus far. Forsberg, who's been in the backup role for most of his career, has been thrust into a bigger role due to circumstance the past couple seasons. And so far in this one, Forsberg has unfortunately been closer to mediocre than anything between the pipes. With a .889 save percentage and a 3.60 goals against average, Forsberg has room for improvement. Since Cam Talbot is now back between the pipes for the Sens, hopefully Forsberg will bounce back with less pressure on his shoulders. If we're comparing the Juuse Saros of last season to this current one we've seen so far, there's a severe contrast. After a stellar performance for the Preds last campaign, the goaltender finished as a finalist for the Vezina Trophy. Looking at his numbers, one could easily say that Saros hasn't been severely overworked. For instance, if we look at John Gibson for example, he's already had to make nearly 100 more saves than Saros has currently. Therefore, for Saros to sport a .892 save percentage and a 3.46 goals against average, this isn't exactly the ideal scenario for Nashville. Another indicator that it isn't solely on the team in front of him is that if we look at Kevin Lankinen's numbers for instance, there's definitely a huge difference between them. But, as I alluded to, Saros definitely has more to give, as he played some of his best games yet last campaign. Since it's still early in the season, hopefully, for Nashville's sake, the netminder will soon find redemption. Among the most disappointing teams so far on the season is the Vancouver Canucks. Similarly to how Winnipeg was last season, the Canucks on paper appeared as a solid team. Despite this though, the Nucks are tied with Nashville for the 6th worst points percentage league-wide. And as I mentioned, tied to a struggling team, usually you'll find a struggling tendy between the pipes. With a 1-7-2 record on the season, Thatcher Demko has been underwhelming at best. But since he's not at the top of the list, it's obvious that the team in front of him has been mediocre as well. Currently sporting the 7th worst save percentage league-wide with a 4.01, Demko's save percentage isn't any better. At the time this video is being made, Demko is tied with Connor Ingram for the 5th worst save percentage league-wide with a .874. Right now, since there's still plenty of time to improve, Canucks fans are most definitely hoping that he and the team can turn it around. Usually, when social media is flooded with footage of Binnington tantrums, it's a sure sign that not all is well with the Blues. And sure enough, just like Vancouver, the Blues have been one of the biggest disappointments that the season has had to offer. Out of their last 9 games, for instance, St. Louis has only managed to snag a single W. Mind you, it was against San Jose. Last season, Binnington's game was shaky and inconsistent. However, the Blues had one of the strongest tandems to offer in the league. Now with Ville Husso gone, even more responsibility has fallen onto the goaltender's shoulders. If we're going game by game, his play has been a mixed bag, meaning that some games he's let in 5 or 6 goals, while in others, he's been more on his game. However, overall statistically, the numbers tell a story. At this point in time, his save percentage is a .888, and his goals against average a 3.33. Even though he's definitely not the worst out there, the goaltender has been far from playing his best game. Possibly the biggest shocker between the pipes so far has been the play of Edmonton's goalie Jack Campbell. Coming in from Toronto, Campbell had worked his way up from previously being a backup in LA to a starter in Leafland. Therefore, when GM Ken Holland recruited the Tendy, his expectations were that he would be able to handle the demands of what the starting job entails. Unfortunately though, Campbell's play has been a far cry from what it was last campaign. Currently sitting with the 6th worst save percentage in the league, Campbell has been letting in close to 4.5 goals per game. Even though the team in front of him could be much better, even Campbell himself admitted he hasn't been close to showing Edmonton his best game.
I just haven't brought my best, and frankly it's just been pathetic the way I've been playing. So, I owe it to this team to bring my A game. I expect to do that at a very high level, and I haven't done that yet.
When the Columbus Blue Jackets embarked on the current campaign, the hope was that with the addition of Johnny Hockey, CBJ would begin rolling. But despite the optimism going in, things haven't went how Jackets fans would have hoped for. And one of the more notable weaknesses visible has been the lack of stable goaltending. As far as Elvis Merzlikins is concerned, the netminder has had a rough go of it thus far. With the worst goals against average league-wide with a 4.82, Merzlikins hasn't seemed like himself in the crease. This downward spiral into mediocrity, however, has allowed for Joonas Korpisalo to get the nod more here recently. Korpisalo, who's played in a couple contests in the season, may just be what CBJ needs in the cage while Elvis looks to recapture his game.